Hey everybody, and we're back. Video number 2. So this one, I need to deviate briefly a bit from the gamey type stuff, the EQ stuff, the game features. I want to cover the basics of how the front-end JavaScript works. I'm not using Angular or React or really any other major framework. I've got jQuery in there, that's about it. So if you are a Angular or React dev, you may want to avert your eyes. Just kidding. You can continue to watch. Um, the framework as it's built has been sort of an evolving thing since like 2010. Is it the best? No, of course it's not. It's just my homegrown thing. Um, Back in 2010 when I was laying the groundwork for a product called Rapid Engines, which is a startup out in Silicon Valley. It was just me, my brother, and another guy. We didn't even use jQuery at the time. That was still fairly new, I think, or at least it wasn't as widespread and widely known as it is today. But I was just doing native JavaScript and very quickly realized we needed something for no other reason, browser standardization. Um, this wasn't a web app that we were building at the time. It was a single page, well, I say web app, I'm thinking like Electron or Chrome app, but it was a single page application, I guess a website. Trying to get my verbology mixed up here, but traditional web interface to a product, lamp stack thing. But my entire focus was the front end. So I quickly pulled in jQuery to solve a lot of our DOM issues and whatnot, and reusability and things like that. And so I quickly identified a lot of patterns that were happening over and over as far as what I call find and bind, where you search the DOM for something, you attach a click handler to it, you point that at a function, rinse, repeat. And for a lot of dynamically inserted things in a single page app, when you're clicking on a tab or you're clicking on this and you're firing off an Ajax and getting a list of things back you got to render, it's a lot of cloning, it's a lot of event handling. If each of those things you're getting back and rendering have their own buttons or their own responsiveness to them, you're doing a lot of what I called finding and binding, and it was getting very monotonous, and it was getting harder to, or more cumbersome to maintain if we were to make changes. So I slowly started to roll together a framework. In hindsight, should I have maybe pulled down one of the bigger frameworks? Probably. But again, this is 2010. I think Angular 1 was probably around then. I'm not sure. I'd have to go look and see exactly when they released. I certainly had not heard of React. And things like Vue and even Ember, I'm sure were a twinkle in some dev's eye at that point. But nonetheless, I took it upon myself, as a proponent of inventing my own things. I decided to sidetrack from some of the actual product feature development and start working on a framework that would cut down a lot of this wasted time doing repetitive things. So I'm just going to introduce that framework. Again, this is nothing special. I'm not claiming that this is anything grand, but it's worked well for me. I, of course, know it very well because I wrote it. So I'm quick with it. Will others be quick with it? Probably not, because I'm probably never going to release it. I've been told I should release it, but again, it wouldn't take anybody long to poke holes in it, and I just don't want to deal with that. So whatever. So let's have a quick look at it. So in this Electron, the Electron portion of this project, the UI is an Electron front end, and we know Electron is just JavaScript, HTML, CSS wrapped in a window. You don't have, minus this console here. When you look at this, you're thinking, oh, this is a desktop application, but it's really not. It's Chrome's V8 engine wrapped in a desktop window frame. Really cool concept, but that's Electron. We're not talking about Electron. So let's look at my JavaScript classes. So the JS directory classes, this is probably still looking fairly standard. When you do modular stuff in other frameworks, you end up with your own directory with your JavaScript, HTML, CSS, but that's about where it ends. Let's take a look at one of these windows. Let's pick something a little dynamic. Let's do the skills window here. So the skills window, it's a very basic window. Quick pause. All of these windows here, these draggable things, these are part of an add-on I built called JWindow. It's just a thing where you can say, you know, var my window equals new JWindow, and you get yourself a draggable empty thing. You can have it with minimize buttons or, you know, close buttons or whatever. Just a very simple window framework. But these are all what I call JWindows. So the class itself, this let's go to the skills window, wind skills. Oops, where is it? Down here. So the window itself, this wind skills, this is not a JWindow. This is just a standalone, I call it class, but it's a function. It's, you know, if you know JavaScript, you know I'm kind of use the two synonymously. This is, again, obviously pre ES6 class capability stuff, but so the window itself, and then part of this window is an actual instance of JWindow. It's one of the first things that happens. So in my, you know, module framework, of whatever you want to call it, a few basic things happen. When you instantiate a new class of something, you obviously pass it options. Those options are enhanced with some defaults. These are considered, you know, your publics or your privates. These all essentially are public because this is all exposable. There's not really a way to differentiate at this point, unless you do some actual class stuff. But regardless, then all your class functions happen. This down here is, you know, children, class children. You know, this is where you can simulate hierarchy to some extent, and then you fire off your construct. This is where we start to emulate some more, you know, traditional object-oriented construct things going on, and then of course you return the object. But here in the construct, the first thing we do is get this pseudo window, an actual JWindow, and we just stick it in SWJWindow. And of course we give it all the properties of the window we want. This JWindow system, by the way, has built-in capability to remember where you dragged and dropped it. It's stored, in this case, in an Electron function that does some local storage stuff. Otherwise it would be cookies, I think, in a normal website interface. But anyway, and so that's the basic hierarchy of a class here. Defaults, your methods, children, fire off a construct, and that's how your class kicks off. I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to go back to the HTML portion because I have a few things to say about how this differentiates from, say, Angular templates or other template-based systems. So, sorry, my cat's jumping on me. Thank you. All right, sorry. So, one thing I've always found unintuitive about these newer frameworks, if you've got something dynamic, in this case, this skills window, the server told me that I have two skills, bash and bind wound. Normally, like, see, I can barely even describe how this would be approached in another framework. I get it because I'm not familiar with it. That's fine. But you know, you would think maybe you'd have, like, you know, you'd stick an ng4 in here, and it would iterate over some data collection and you know, render the appropriate buttons. That's fine. I get it. That could probably work. My objection to that is I don't feel like for loops should exist in HTML code. For loops are a programming thing. It's a JavaScript thing. It should be in JavaScript. So with that said, and I know you're probably, like, you know, looking to hit me with a book or something at this point and, you know, call me a heretic, but, you know, just a personal opinion, take it or leave it. And I'm sure there are pros and cons to doing it the other way. It's just a very, it's a very I don't want to say backwards, that's almost insulting, but it's a very different way of approaching things, putting a lot of dynamic things in HTML versus letting, say, JavaScript drive the bus, as it were. So I'll walk you through how it happens in JavaScript. You can probably imagine at this point how it works. I'll walk you through it anyway. So in this skills window, when the game says, "Hey, make a new skills window," I'll take you there real briefly. All right. So when the player enters the zone, it makes all the new game components relevant to what's going on in the zone and the fact you have an active player. And one of those is win skills. So very simple. Game win skills is a new win skills and a reference to a game. Although in this point, game is global, so we don't really need to do this. But for modular, potentially testing purposes, maybe we want to use a different sort of instance of game to do something. Anyway, so new win skills. So here we are. Again, we've went over how this object is structured. Got ourselves a new J window. Let's pick it up right here. Parts. So to populate this window, you dip into what's called system.parts. The system.parts is what I call sort of a parts dictionary or a parts repository. If we jump over here into system.js, which is where the magic happens, system parts is new system-based parts. Don't worry about this part here. What this does, when I say system parts integrate, what that does is this looks in this file called parts.html. And this parts.html file, as you can guess, is an automatic concatenation of every class and their HTML file. So parts for window, this is actually, I think, basic JWindow stuff. Yeah, parts for window, that might actually need to be JWindow instead. But anyway, and then anything else. This is a JTable plugin. Let's find the win skills, if it's even in here. Yeah, here we go. Parts for skills window, and that's going to be the same as what's in here. So we'll just we'll stick to this file. We'll close out parts.html. So system parts integrate apply. Look for skills window. Look for body. Simple sort of class or a tag selector. Let me go back to Windows skills. Oh, I'm in there. So parts skills window, parts for body. Yeah, so it finds that portion. It finds ultimately this. It drops the parts. It drops this part. So while technically the selector I gave it is going to match this, it actually is smart enough to drop out these parts because these parts are semantically part of the system, not what you want back. So this is what it gives you back. Gives you a button holder. So we can say, because this is in the construct, that a skills window is always going to have a button holder. It's going to be empty at first, but it's going to have a button holder all the time. You'll notice it has data.js name. That is sort of a nicety of this part system integration function. Instead of doing SW body equals that and SW dot button holder equals SW dot body dot find button holder. Instead of doing that for every possible named thing in here, because this is a very simple thing, but you could have 20, 30 different named objects as part of this body or as part of a fancy controller or something. Because it's here in data.js name, once you do system parts integrate apply, it automatically now exists as div button holder. You can do whatever you want. This is a jQuery object reference, so now you could do that, and that's perfectly valid, even though you haven't really defined it past here. It is defined. The system parts does it. That's why this apply thing is here. I actually rewrote this recently to not do apply. I think I made it, more option thing, source, blah, selector, blah. Just a little more semantically obvious. But nonetheless, it does the same thing. It automatically inserts these named references in there. And I don't think I do demonstrate it in here. Data.js events, same thing. So well, let's come back to that briefly. So we get our button holder, and And then also, this is game related, so just kind of roll with this. I register a WebSocket. This is called route. Don't read into much of the word route. This is not an actual route like you would expect in a URL bar. This just means that if the server tells me, or if the server sends me an opcode about the skills I have, fire off this function. And in this function, you can guess, we start making these buttons. That is apparently an integrate skill. So I iterate through whatever the server told me, integrate the skill, and of course, here's our new button. One of the child objects of this window is a button. So this is the thing that's going to get instanced. New button skill ID blah from whatever got passed into this integrate function. And again, same thing here. We get our options passed into some defaults. Define all our methods. There are no children at this point. Hit the construct, return the object. And again, just like up here, the body for this button, system parts integrated apply, skills window button, which is going to get you this. Now, here's where the stage.js events picks up. As you can probably guess, click and mouse down automatically come with this. So I don't have to do the equivalent long way would have been me.body.find, let's just say it was called button. I don't know what it actually is called. On click, me.on clicked. I would have to do that for every possible event, mouse up, mouse down, if it's a text box, blur, change, all that stuff. You can put whatever events you want in here, and you get the corresponding. All you got to do on the JavaScript side then is just declare the event and do whatever you want inside it. So in this case, when the button is clicked, I actually send a game-related opcode saying, hey, I want to activate this skill ID. The skill ID came in when I made the button. So yeah, that's really the only two special things about this this part system, this template system. There are no special squiggly identifiers. Because again, I go with sort of a JavaScript-driven approach to all this stuff. And again, I get it, there are pros and cons. So don't ding me too hard on this. So I've covered HTML. And yeah, the CSS, yeah, a big downside, and again, I get it, is that all the CSS is global. It's not localized in any manner. So when you're writing your module CSSs, you need to make sure that everything is fully qualified. So that's something I haven't even really taken a stab at trying to solve. Yeah, I mean, I'm already trying to think of how to do it in my head, but I'm not gonna take time in this video to even speculate it. But yeah, that is a downside, global CSS. So you just got to be smart about how you name things. I mean, you can see this is not exactly a simple project here, a simple UI. There's lots to it, but I mean, as long as you're not an idiot about how you name things, these selectors are not that big. They're not that complicated. So it really hasn't been a pain point, is basically what I'm saying. I guess maybe like a SAS or a less compile step in there would probably help too. But again, there really isn't a build step in this. Let me take you back to index.html, because that's another big portion of this framework. This parts HTML file, this big dictionary, where did this come from? This is auto-generated. Okay, well, what auto-generated it? Let me pretend like this is a web app, because this index.html file, if you think this is manually maintained, you'd be wrong. Normally, if this were a normal web app, what it's going to look like, because this is Electron, I had to do it slightly different. But if this were a normal web app, it would be like head. It's the thing. There's a PHP class called head writer. It would be something like that. And this head writer pops open package.json. You're probably familiar with this file. This is a package.json for the Electron app, but I'm actually including my stuff in it as well. So the head writer looks in here. It sees what do I need to put at the top. So let's undo this and take a quick look at the structure of this. So obviously you've got your CSS first, then your JavaScript. I'm trying to think if there's anything else involved here. I don't think so. So as far as how this relates to package.json, whatever you've defined here, you could actually collapse this down. If I did combine true, I would just get a CSS blob and a JavaScript blob. And those would have just been the result of catting all this stuff together in order. Order is important because this Electron fix needs to happen right after jQuery. But I could do that. So the point being here, this head writer looks at the index files, decides what to output, and then modules are kind of separate. So this is like the important frameworky stuff, and then lastly, modules. And that just means that they pick up right around here. And in this file, they're of course at the same level, but I felt it was appropriate to separate sort of modules, add-on stuff to frameworky stuff. But in my project, since this is an Electron app, and there isn't I guess a back-end processing portion of this that I can, I can't just do that in Electron, because this is all running through the Electron frame. I can't just do this and start putting stuff. It has no idea what PHP is. But my head writer has been adapted to dump out this thing here. So if I do make a change to a parts file, or what else, CSS stuff, actually not just a change, if I need to add to this, let me undo all this. If I need to add a new module, like I just added this entity editor a few days ago, that's this thing here that's going to be like path management and spawn point management. That was a new thing, so I had to go into the package.json, add it, and then I have what is it called? Manager. So this is kind of like your build step. I can rebuild everything and rebuild the index HTML, parts, and CSS. And normally, again, this would have been done in a web app environment. It would have been done if I were to put the head writer line in here, and every time you F5 your page, all that stuff's being rebuilt anyway. Again, I get it. It's not that fancy live update stuff where you hit save on your HTML on the server side, and Chrome's got some socket open and like magically updates your HTML when half the time that stuff breaks anyway and requires a full refresh regardless. But that's neither here nor there. So for this particular Electron project, if I do make fundamental changes here, I just need to come in here and rebuild the UI files. This can be done on a command line. You don't need this MGR thing. Really, it was just another way to do it is like utils head writer. If I do that, new Electron. That actually just did it right there. But no, they're not a help. But there's like a flag I added to it. It will actually dump out. Yeah, it dumps out the HTML to the console, and then the MGR utility is what takes that output and writes it to index.html. Excuse me. So that's sort of the basics of how this again, I don't even want to call it a framework, of this system, how it sort of maintains itself. Same thing like I mentioned with the parts that get catted together, the CSS gets catted together as well, I believe. Maybe that was an option in package.json. Yeah, maybe it doesn't. Wait. Yeah, currently it does not get catted together. It could with the combine, but as soon as you combine CSS together, you kind of lose track. If you lose track of where in the CSS something's looking weird because you can't really see the CSS line reference. If I look at something, I can get the file name and the number right away. But if that was catted into blob.css, it's going to be line 2000 something, and there's no point going into that blob because that file is going to get regenerated at some point. So let me see if there's anything else in this parts system, this framework, that is worth talking about. I'll walk through the main game.js, which is kind of the whole engine. Again, this follows the same convention where you've got your construct function, all the methods, any events that might need to be defined. These aren't necessarily data.js event stuff. I don't even think there is. Is there a body here in game? I don't think there is. No. Nope. But there are methods. There is a child, construct, return, boom. So this is really just a poor man's class structure. I found it to be very useful, very repeatable. It's covered pretty much every use case I can think of. Never really been in a situation where I've run into some development need that just won't fit in this paradigm. I'm not saying it's the best thing in the world, but I am saying it is pretty versatile. But all right, we can leave it there, I think.